Hello, YouTubers, and welcome back to another episode of the Grandstand here on the Ohio Patriot Education Network YouTube channel. I'm, as always, your host, the Ohio Patriot. For today's episode, we're going to talk about the recent passing of Hollywood director and actor Rob Reiner, specifically him and his wife's murders that happened yesterday. From what everything is known now, is basically his son that probably committed them, is what it is. And we'll get into more about that in a few minutes, is what it is. We're also going to discuss the Islamic terror attacks today. This past weekend, specifically, they were in Australia, and then there was also another one here in attack at Brown University here in America that may or may not have been Islamic terrorism. However, there was another attack of a random woman in Georgia that had some kind of acid or acidic substance thrown on her face/body that may have actually just been an Islamic terror attack at that one case as well. So, yeah, there's rise of different stuff going on right now is what it is here in America and abroad, for that matter, that I want to discuss. And then there's a couple other things, too, for that matter. Obviously, everybody's kind of freaking out right now over Rob Reiner's passing, specifically because of something that Trump had said on, I believe it was, Truth Social, there is what it was. And then, of course, I had some people come at me earlier through the Netflix X account there because I specifically said something this morning about how it was basically karma coming back around that, potentially caused Rob Reiner's death, is what it is there. And, of course, idiots take it out of context. And if you have a problem with that, fuck you is what it is, dude. That's what I'm saying on that one. Like, if you have a problem with me calling out, karmatic stuff from Rob Reiner literally having TDS and stuff like that, you can go fuck yourself, is what it is. And if you want to throw a bunch of shade our way and stuff, guess what? You can have a defamation, slander lawsuit coming against you, is what it is then. If you try to slander us or defame us, is what it is then. So, anyway. But yeah, that being said, I don't know. I'm going to throw out a theory about the whole thing, but we'll go ahead and talk about Trump's, what he said about Rob Reiner before that, though. So this is what Trump put out about 4 or 5 hours ago, I think is what it was, which was a very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling but once very talented movie director and comedy star, has passed away, together with his wife, Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused through others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with the mind-crippling disease known as Trump syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession with President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before, may Rob and Michelle rest in peace. That is kind of a fucked up statement, I'm not going to lie, dude. Like, that is kind of, punching, I guess it's kicking dead horses, that'd be the case then. But I don't know. It's a messed up statement, but at the same time, it's the fact is basically saying that Rob Reiner did have TDS, obviously, and we all know that for a fact he did for a decade, is what it is there. And I find it interesting too because if I'm not mistaken, I believe Trump and Reiner both used to hang out in the same kind of circles there in Hollywood for many years of their lives. That's what it was. And that's another thing when it comes to Trump specifically too, is that when you look at his celebrity status before he ran for president in 2015, everybody wanted to hang out with that dude, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go into politics now, and all of a sudden everybody turned their backs on him there in Hollywood, which makes sense given that, what we're about here in a minute now, which is how many pedophiles and how much pedophilia is going around in Hollywood there. I'm not saying that Rob Reiner was a pedophile. I have no proof of this at all. However, the fact that there is a real possibility that his son Nick is the one that killed him and his wife, and mind you, Nick himself was, I believe, 32 or 33, and from what I was reading with one of the AP articles this morning, this dude basically had serious drug issues since he was 18 years old, is what it was. So I find it very interesting that instead of Rob Reiner taking care of his shit at home, being his son and family and stuff like that, dealing with his real life issues, there is what it is. He's going to sit there and try and throw shade at Trump all the time, is what it is there. And on top of that, though, with Nick himself, when you look at Hollywood and how many of these young Hollywood actors and stuff like that, I don't know if Nick ever was a Hollywood actor or not, for that matter, but I know a lot of these other Hollywood actor kids that have gone on to be drug addicts and stuff like that. Many of them have moved to the drug addiction because of the fact they're trying to suppress and cope with being molested by people in Hollywood, is what it is there. So, do I believe that Nick was either molested by his own father or potentially was taken to a party there in Hollywood, molested by a bunch of Hollywood chicks? I don't know. It's a very real possibility, though. Given how disgusting and demonically evil Hollywood really is, there is what it is. So, could that come out in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year from now? Who knows? Maybe, perhaps. That being said, obviously this dude was like clearly troubled. He obviously had like serious, mental / drug addiction issues is what it is there, which makes sense why he would like. My assumption at this point, honestly, with the little bit of information that I've seen today, is what it is over this whole double murder, basically what it is, their double homicide, is I would be willing to bet that Nick himself went to his parents in the last couple of days, here's what it is, and maybe this is a couple months even back, to where he was basically trying to beg him for money, and he was going to use that money on drugs and stuff like that, because the thing is, like, the dude had gotten, like, various stints in rehab and stuff over the years, and so I could easily see it being a situation there where he basically went to his parents and was like, hey, I need some money, like X amount of money, whatever it is there, and they're like, no, you're just going to use it on drugs or something like that, and then he basically, him and his dad out again or something, probably, is my guess, and then he was either staying with them or he had a way into their house or something, was my guess, whether it be a spare key, whether it be just broken, honestly, and then he just killed him. He just stabbed him to death, as it was then. So, and could that also potentially maybe be revenge for, a childhood of being, preyed upon by child molesters? Maybe not, honestly. Again, I think the only time will tell on that one is what it is. But, I mean, anything's possible at this point, honestly, dude. Like, the shit just doesn't happen in a vacuum like that, honestly. And I think that's what people need to realize and wake up to, is what it is. And so, yeah, when you have a dude who is, at one point, like, a decent actor, a decent comedian, a decent, director, etc., and Rob Reiner, who then just became some leftist nut piece of shit in the past decade or so. Like, who gives a fuck if somebody calls him out for that, dude? Like, it's not, first of all, it's not celebrating the man's death. It's literally calling a piece of shit is what it is in the story. And if you have a problem with that, then fuck you is what it is. You're a nitwit, you're a midwit, you're a fucking idiot is what it is there, honestly. So, but yeah, Rob Reiner was a piece of shit, period, dude, in the story. Like, with him gone now, will society be better overall? Maybe not, who knows? Maybe it'll lead to more things in the future, who the fuck knows, man? Honestly, again, only time tells. So, but on that note, though, there is an interesting one I do want to talk about as well, which is besides Rob Reiner's and his wife Michelle's untimely demise yesterday, apparently you also had the death of another Hollywood actor, which was specifically soap star He played Luke Spencer on General Hospital, dies at the age of 78. I actually thought this guy was already dead, but I'm thinking maybe it was because they killed him off in the soap show, I think it was, several years back, and that's why I thought that was what it was. So, yeah, just a very sad ending, honestly. That dude really was like a legendary soap actor. I remember years ago, when Mom was still around, we would usually watch General Hospital together, and we both very much enjoyed Luke's storylines, as what it was over the years. Obviously, that dude was on that show for like, I think it was like 30 years off and on or something like that. Like, it was a long, long time. So, but yeah, he definitely had like a decent place there in the Hollywood soap opera Hall of Fame, I guess is what it would be if you want to call it that. So, it is very tragic and sad. But, unfortunately, everybody goes out at some point is what it is. Some of their own volition, some of other people's volition, and some just, due to old age or something else for that matter. Big pharma, big agro, whatever it is. Who knows? So, heart attack, stroke, whatever you want to call it there. But anyway, yeah, just very, very sad all the way around is what it is. And like I said, I think it's going to be I think it's going to be some time now before we actually find out what happens to, or what actually happened there with Rob Reiner and his wife's, murders, and then obviously potentially there's something the killers what it is there. If we actually get the real truth out of the son, for that matter, for all we know, the kid's going to lie his ass off what it is there. So, but I don't know. It's hard to say. The one thing I will say though, it's interesting to me too, because you'll have these people that will, go out there and be all like this, that, and the other thing. But is like, I think my biggest issue with a lot of society these days is what it is that you have way too much Hollywood idolizing and just like Hollywood ideology in general is what it is there. Because the fact of the matter is, had Rob Reiner not been a known person, like not been a famous person, whatever the case be, nobody would even give a fuck, dude. Like nobody would even care. They would see like it would have been like Joe Schmo down the street, and Michelle Schmo or whatever the case be. You would have had that be like a snippet in a local newscast, most likely, of local couple found killed, son arrested, or whatever the case be. Is probably going to be the storyline for that one. It'd be like a 10, maybe 20-second little thing in a local, like 5 o'clock news, and then it would go on for that would basically be it for that whole story. And there might be like an update to it like 6-8 months later when the kid is like, tried and convicted or whatever of their crime. Versus with Hollywood now, and it being such a known thing and everything like that, now you have all this shit now where it's going to be like, the whole new, like, I feel like honestly, like, and I think some of this shit, honestly, like, I'm not trying to say there's like a psyop or anything here is what it is, but I feel like the media itself creates like a bunch of distraction is what it is. And I feel like this is going to be used very much as a distraction for like the next week or two is what it is there. So, like, I'm not trying to go like full conspiracy theory or whatever the case be there, where it's like, oh yeah, this was totally like someone else doing this, and then it's like basically used to like smoke and mirrors and a bunch of other different stuff going on and behind closed doors or whatever it is there. But I could easily see this being used by the mainstream media over like the next week or two is what it is there, and be pushed as like the forefront story and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, Trump said this and that about Rob Reiner after his passing, blah, 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 and trying to make it like a much bigger, like basically trying to make a mountain out of a molehill is what it is there. And in doing so, I think it's going to be like one of those situations where back in the day, where you had something during Obama's administration, and then it was basically when they were covering like this one thing is like the main thing, whatever, of the day for like a week or two is what it was. You had like all this other like super serious shit going on as like the background stories when it was like various bombings for other countries and stuff like that's what it is there. I'm not saying that's what this is going to be used for, honestly, but I think it could be used for something similar to what it is there. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's, like, some various, like, stories that come out this week that the media doesn't really talk about because they're basically covering the Rob Reiner, Donald Trump, back and forth. There's what it is. Disparaging remarks is what they're calling it now, obviously. Which, like I said, it is kind of a fucked up thing, but it is what it is. Like that, and what I think is funny too is like one of my buddies, his son was basically talking about Trump and like basically making about himself with that whole statement. There is what it is, and how basically Trump himself had like TDS or whatever the case, which is kind of stupid because it's like, well, do you obviously don't know what TDS stands for then, obviously, and if you wanted to be realistic about it, is what it is there. What it would actually be is it would be Trump having like narcissistic personality disorders, what it is there, or something most likely, where he's just a narcissist is what it is. So, which makes logical sense. Most of these people are is what it is there, whether it be the Hollywood types, whether it be billionaires, etc. They're all a bunch of narcissistic people, so it is there. And actually, when you look into politics specifically in this country and other countries, almost everybody that's in these political power seats like that, especially like the higher ones, is what it is there. They're all a bunch of psychopaths, legitimately. So, when you start looking into psychopathy and things like that, you start realizing like people are just nuts. That's what it is, and are just driven by greed, power, etc. There's what it is, which makes sense. That's why you have these people that are in Congress and Senate for 20, 30, 40, 50 years in a lot of cases because they just grab onto that, you know, ring of power, just never let it go is what it is there. It's like the whole Lord of the Rings thing where it's like, my precious, and stuff like that. So, by the way, I hope you guys enjoy my new hat. I got this in the other day. It's 100% cotton. It's keeping my head nice and warm today because it's like 4 degrees outside or something. So, I like it. It was like $10 or something on Amazon there. So, but yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about the other stories of the day specifically, which is obviously you had Brown University's attack this week, or this past weekend, I should say, where you had somebody shooting up that school is what it is there. One thing I find interesting about that is you had at least one congresswoman named Angie Craig who came out and was like, oh, this is why we need to ban long guns and high-capacity magazines and stuff like that, which, by the way, neither one of those things are used in this tragedy is what it is there. This preventable tragedy, by the way. This tragedy that could have been prevented had we not had fucking gun-free zones on college campuses. And that's exactly why I believe, truthfully, like, all these politicians that keep these things in place like that should be charged as accessories to these massacres in the future is what it is. And actually, I would say not even the future. I'd say present, basically. Like, if you were part of the people that put these in place and kept them in place, like, you need to be in prison right now for that shit because you stopped other people from being armed to take out the potential killer in the situation, what it is there. And not only that, but then I was looking into specifically Angie Craig this morning, and shocker, this bitch has been in power since like 2020, and her entire campaign funding has come from Everytown / Bloomberg's anti-gun asses. So, yeah, it's not a surprise at all when you look into these pieces of shit and you start to realize that, yeah, they're just pieces of shit is what it is there, dude. So, yeah, here's a, go to Discord here for a minute. We'll talk about Angie Craig momentarily. Yeah, it was Angie Craig has been a member of Congress for 5 years from Minnesota, saying, quote unquote, it is time to ban assault weapons and high capacity magazines, neither of which were used in the Rhode Island attack there at Brown University. And then you had this little anti-gun fuckboy, Cameron Casey, who you may remember was one of the Parkland anti-gun sacks of shit. This kid is now trying to run for Congress in 2026 to replace Jerry Nadler in New York State. And his whole thing was, here's why I was opposed. I opposed the shooter from my high school getting death penalty. We will not stop violence by focusing on the evil in human beings. We need to focus on the evil in systems. What a fucking clown. I believe it was also Cameron Casey was the same douchebag. It was his, I believe, aunt, I want to say. I believe it was aunt, or maybe it was godmother, one of the two. I think it was his aunt, though, who was either a U.S. senator or a U.S. congressman at the time of the Parkland tragedy. And yeah, there's a lot of shady shit in that specific one there, dude, of like him basically being, like him, Hogg, etc., being pushed to the forefront as an anti-gun group because of Cameron's ties to a sitting U.S. senator or congressman was what it was there. So, yeah, and these are honestly the kind of people that, like, specifically like him, Maxwell Frost, etc., because they're pre-oath breakers, they've already proven that they're oath breakers to begin with before even like running for office. This is why they should be automatically disqualified from even running for political power in this country, because they are nothing but oath-breaking little fucking cunts that will never, ever, ever sit there and truly swear an oath to the Constitution, because if they did, it would mean that they would have to protect the Second Amendment, which is what they automatically are running destroy with their fucking campaign promises, their campaign platforms, etc., basically doing gun bans and shit like that. Which, again, if we lived in a just society, people would be kicked out of the fucking race is what it is, then on the spot is what it is, man. Be like, nope, sorry, bitch, you are an oath breaker, go fuck yourself, get the fuck out of here. So, Oh yeah. Then you had Michigan governor candidate Jacqueline Benson doubles down on refusing to comply with federal law that protects our elections and calls for more governors to say no to that law. Makes sense, given the fact that this bitch is the current Secretary of State of Michigan, and there is more than enough evidence if Trump was to go out there and do his job as president, and Congress was to do their job as a congressional entity, and simply force mandatory election audits and start with Michigan, because I guarantee you would find that not only did Benson cheat her way back into power in 2022, so did Whitmer, and so did Nissel into the governorship and AG's office specifically, is what it is there. And not only that, but then you actually look into Benson's bullshit before that, because you go back to the 2020 lockdowns, and it was about maybe a month or so into the lockdown there in Michigan. You had some person, or it was a group of people actually, I think it started with like one person, then it became like a small group of people, and then it became like a larger group of people as it was there, had basically come together and were trying to do a recall vote on Whitmer from the governor's office because of her tyrannical bullshit over the COVID lockdowns, is what it is there. And Benson specifically refused to push the stuff through and do her job as Secretary of State to actually initiate the recall that was being pushed, that had more than enough signatures to be put through as recalls, what it is there. And from my understanding, she did this at least 2 other times, if I'm not mistaken. I know it was at least twice she did it. I think maybe it was the third time, actually, she did it too as well. And when you're doing that stuff multiple times like that, the fact that you're even still in office right now is absolutely ridiculous, dude, because this is the problem with our society when it comes to people being in power at all, because when you have recall voting against them, or against others that they refuse to certify, and then you can't exactly recall them somehow because it's like a whole like bunch of fuckery. There's what it is. What I don't understand at all, because it's like, and this is why really you should have like some kind of county boards, what it is there, being able to certify that stuff. I guess a sitting Secretary of State or whatever the case be then, which I think there probably is. I'm sure there probably is a way to remove them from power. That'd be the case in terms of recalls, but again, it depends on how Michigan law works and what it is there. But yeah, it's much shit all the way around, dude. This is exactly what people need to go to prison for what it is right now. For massive voter fraud, for deprivation of of law, for the anti-gun stuff that they've done to this country in various states and federally, et cetera, there. So, anyway. And then, of course, you had that Manchurian candidate asswipe, Byron Hollahand, come out against the whole Trump thing today, where he said, "We can't call out the left for celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination, but laugh at this because that's a mean tweet. Taking a victory lap when a critic is killed. That's how you lose Gen Z and independence. You can't sit on a pedestal and condemn the left, but normalize this," which was Trump's statement, obviously. And again, to that, like I said on X earlier, to the network's moniker, that Hollahand can go fuck himself. I'm personally sick and tired of sitting back and watching these little ass wipes thinking they have a fucking position to stand on at this point, have any leg to stand on for that matter. It's like, dude, you are a little fucking shitwit. You have no life experience whatsoever. Go fuck yourself. You don't have a full frontal lobe development at this point, buddy. So until you do, shut the fuck up and sit the fuck down. End of story. So, that Brittany Hughes woman is talking about Democrats renewing their anti-gun demands now. Oh yeah, she's talking about that Angie woman going for the AWB and standard capacity magazine bans is what it is. Which that's one thing I do want to point out, by the way, is like 30-round magazines are standard capacity in this country, dude. For ARs, AKs, etc. They're not high capacity. They're not anything but standard. And to call them high capacity is absolutely ridiculous, is what it is. And it's ironic that you have these same people who talk about Australia as being some kind of a, giant fucking, like, great utopia for doing a gun ban back in the 90s over, like, one kid committing a massacre there instead of, going after that kid is what it is there. And ironically enough, now you have 2 Islamic terrorists, father and son. I believe it was yesterday or it was Saturday afternoon, going to a place called, I believe it was Bondi Beach, and shooting a bunch of people there is what it was. So, yeah, it's a bunch of sick, disgusting stuff, dude, what it is. And this is the problem when you have these people that are trying to take away your gun rights while mass importing third world trash into our country, and at the same time, basically bringing Islamic terrorism on U.S. soil is what it is now. And I think they have any fucking leg at all to stand on is what it is. When they don't, they have no leg to stand on whatsoever is what it is. Ever. Ever, ever. Never, ever. So, yeah, it's a bunch of shit all the way around, dude. And that same Britney woman actually said a good one on a YouTube short earlier today, which you guys can go check her out. She's I think she does like Facebook stuff too, if I'm not mistaken, in a lot of cases. It's the brown hair lady right there is what it is. Where she said, Brown University, Australia, the West is letting evil run rampant. And that's true, by the way. When you have, you know, Islamic terrorism running wild like crazy here, and you have just like all kinds of other evil running wild, you know. I was watching a video that that Pearl chick did. Oh, it was a couple days ago with Andrew. I'm trying to think what the guy's last name is. Bronca, something like that. He's one of the self-defense attorney guys is what it is there that I believe was part of Nick Rikita's panels during the Rittenhouse trial and stuff like that back in the day. And it was basically him discussing with her about how if we had like a mandatory 3 strikes law in the books right now, you would have something like 97% of all violent crime basically go away, because almost all of it is done by repeat offenders that are arrested. Like that one guy, that Irina woman on the train there, that dude had 14 felony convictions before that and was still let back on the streets because of some bullshit leftist black judge who wanted to basically give him some like equity justice or something, I think is what it was, or some bullshit like that. It was some BLM kind of justice crap is what it is. And it's like, or it's like the one guy that was a career criminal and multi-decade arsonist there in Chicago that set that girl on fire on the train there. And it was the DA telling the judge that was like, this guy's literally a 30-year felon who has many more arrests like this previously, lady. Like, do not let him out. And that judge let that motherfucker walk as it was. Which, that's what I don't understand, is how these activist judges are not being arrested as accessories after the fact for this stuff, because they are literally helping perpetrate a future crime by these people by letting them back on the streets instead of locking them behind bars where they belong, is what it is. So it really is just psychotic is what it is, man. Like, it's just absolutely fucking insane, just all the way around. So, but yeah, I feel like we're definitely heading towards a bad time in human history right now is what it is. And whether that be another civil war, whether that be another revolution, whether that be a new version of the Crusades, who knows? But I think we're definitely heading for bad times here right now. So, you know, that's where my focus is right now. My focus is not on some dead Hollywood piece of shit, basically. It's on, you know, society as a whole, and not, you know, dying in some kind of collapse or whatever the case be then. And I feel like that's a lot more what people need to realize is, like, you need to have your priorities straight at this point, people. You need to realize that, you know, when it's all said and done, you got to protect you and yours when anybody else is what it is there. And just because somebody calls out a tragedy and the piece of shit involved in said tragedy for who they were, that doesn't mean that they're celebrating their death. It means they're just calling them out for the piece of shit they were, is what it is. You know? Like, if I was seriously over here celebrating Rob Reiner's death, I'd be literally cracking a beer and be like, yeah, fuck that guy. I'm not doing that, obviously, because I'm not a fucking piece of shit. Now, granted, was Rob Reiner a piece of shit? Yeah, he was. He was definitely some leftist nut for sure, man. And again, only time will tell in a future trial of his son for his murder if, in fact, he was also potentially a child molester. So, would I be surprised if he was? No. Would I be surprised if there was a lot more in Hollywood that were potentially named by his son in a future trial? Is what it is? No. I would not be surprised at all if that be the case. So, again, do I think that's what really happened? Maybe, maybe not. I believe it was more to the fact that this kid was definitely a drug addict, and he was probably, you know, just finally had, like, it was basically the drugs taking over, if that be the case then. And whether Nick Reiner was on fentanyl, whether he was on, some kind of other drugs, heroin, whatever the case be, it was potentially the heroin or the fentanyl that killed his parents, not the kid. So, because that's the thing, when you're on drugs like that, man, like, it ain't you. It's whatever that, feeding upon that has taken over your brain and fucked with you chemically is what it is there. So, it's a tragic situation all the way around is what it is. But again, like I said earlier, if this dude was not a famous actor, director, etc., nobody would bat an eye. Like, they'd be like, "Oh, that sucked." Like, you would see a local news story about a similar situation there where it was like double homicide or whatever, and it was the child that did it or whatever. And they'd be like, "That's fucked up," and then they move on to their lives as it is then. But unfortunately, because we live in this fucked up ideological world where you have the media trying to make Hollywood stars into some kind of weird godlike idols is what it is. They basically push this shit for weeks on end instead of just letting it go after like a day or two is what it is then. So, am I going to lose any sleep over this whole thing? No, I'm not. And that's the entire point. I think everybody else should think the same way, honestly. It's like, why should you lose sleep over, some dead Hollywood guys, what it is there? Who didn't give two shits about you and your family and never would. So, like I said, it's a sad situation all the way around. But again, it happens every single day, man, unfortunately. And that's how the real world is right now. We are in a, good versus evil situation here in our society. And it seems like evil is winning out a lot more than good is. And it's very, very sad all the way around is what it is. So, I would tell everybody right now, honestly, best thing you can do in your life is get right with God at this point, because who's to say it's not going to be some Book of Revelation stuff going on pretty soon. I mean, hell, given the crazy weather patterns recently, I would not be surprised in the least if we had some kind of Book of Revelation situation pretty soon. I mean, seriously, the past 2 days here in Ohio, it's gone. We've been, actually this morning it was down to single digits and we were in negative weather. It's like -6, I think is what it was this morning. And then yesterday it was only like 11 or 12 degrees and it was like -3, 4 was the real feel. So, yeah, I can definitely see some like biblical shit happening right now. And whether it be, due to like actual Book of Revelation stuff, or whether it be due to like governments fucking around with HARP and stuff like that, or any kind of other relation stuff is what it is there, cloud seeding, etc., could obviously be a cause too for that matter. So, again, only time will tell, and I'm sure we'll have like, declassified documents like 15, 20 years down the road about this stuff now is what it is. That actually did tell the truth, that'd be the case then, but by then, who's to say we're not going to be in a, winter hellscape if that be the case then or something. But anyway, it is what it is. So, like I said, you can only live every day to its fullest, basically, and hopefully it's not your last, unfortunately. And I will say I will give my condolences to Michelle Reiner for sure, because she seems like she was probably an innocent in all this, at least what we know now anyway. Might come out later and she just, turned a blind eye to her husband being a piece of shit to their son, if that'd be the case then. So, who knows? But, yeah, my condolences do go out to her and stuff and the rest of the family. Do I really give a shit about Rob Reiner, though? No. Fuck that guy. So, anyway. But yeah, it's basically, is what it is. So, move on with your life, do better, be better than these people are that are in Hollywood. Who it is, man. I mean, if we lived in a true just society, you'd have all the people that were not pieces of shit in Hollywood out the actual child molesters for who they are is what it is then. But unfortunately, when you start looking into things and you realize that there's like dirt here and dirt there, and everybody seems to have dirt, everybody else is what it is there that don't want their, fucked up secrets out or whatever it is there. Then, of course, they got you by the balls is what it is. And, like I've said it before, honestly, I don't believe everybody in Hollywood's a pedophile, but I think there's way too many pedophile enablers what it is there, where you have these people that are like, maybe they're like cokehead or something like that, or they're like serious like drug addiction they don't want out or whatever it is there. And because of that, that's what they're being black with. Or it could be a situation, I think I've talked about this before in a couple different streams, where it could be one of those things where it's like, you got like some newcomer A-list star or whatever in Hollywood there, and they go to some party, and then it was like, they get like somebody maybe puts like a roofie in their drink or something like that is what it is there. And now all of a sudden you have what you think is like 18, 19, 20-year-old chick walking in the door. And it turns out that person is like a 15-year-old or something like that, or 14-year-old girl, something like that is what it is there. And then that child ends up, Hollywood star. And then that's basically, the whole thing's being filmed. And that's how they got blackmail on you, where it's like you didn't want to, do anything for that kid, but because you were so fucked up or whatever from the people drugging you is what it is there, that now you're basically like up shit's creek is what it is there. And I think that's what a lot of these things are, honestly. Like I would say, honestly, I would give it a 50-50 at this point, honestly, or maybe like a 60-40 or whatever the case be, where it's like 60% of the people are like just sick pieces of shit, and the other 40% are basically the ones that are, being blackmailed into being pieces with them is what it is there. So, unfortunately, when you have people like Isaac Cappy, who was like a D or E-list actor, who called this stuff up for what it was, what happened to him? They literally threw him off a fucking bridge, made up like a suicide. And I believe it was either Arizona or New Mexico is where he died at there. So, yeah. And I think that's why so many people have not come out after that is what it is then, because they don't want to die too is what it is. So, and it's just a sad situation all the way around, like I said. And I think that's why you've seen this weird fracture in Hollywood, where all these people who do identify as Christian and stuff like that have basically left the industry and left that hellhole, demonic pit is what it is there, and have now gone on to do other stuff and like these random, like, Christ companies is what it is there that do movies and stuff like that, like the ones that did that Unplanned movie years ago. So, but yeah, I would not, like, honestly, like, what's interesting to me too, like, when you start looking into what Hollywood pushes as entertainment, I believe sometimes what they're pushing as entertainment is them specifically telling the truth of what's actually going on in our society is what it is there, under a, horror or a comedy genre or whatever it is there. And I would not be the least bit surprised if shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer with the Hellmouth stuff, or like movies like that Cabin in the Woods movie, where it was something similar underneath the cabin there to keep like the ancient evil at bay or whatever there. I would not be the least bit surprised if it was stuff like that, honestly, where some of that was actually legitimately going on in real life is what it is there, or even like Supernatural for that matter, where you had, there were so many episodes of that where you got like Crossroads demon deals and stuff like that for people to gain like power and influence and things like that. I would not be the least bit surprised if you actually had a bunch of sitting congressmen and stuff like that right now, whether it be Democratic Party, whether it be Republican Party, like the old and stuff like that, like the neocon types and stuff like that. I would not be the least surprised if these people were actually holding power because of demon deals at Crossroads and stuff like that, and potentially are demons themselves what it is then, which is why I think we need to have mandatory exorcism tests in this country to even hold office, because if you're, doing holy water splashes on people and stuff like that and their skin's burning, like, yeah, they're demonically possessed what it is then. So, or if you did like, some like Latin phrase or whatever it is there, to potentially expel a demon from them, and all of a sudden you see like a bunch of black smoke start flying out of their fucking mouth and shit like that. Like, turns out they were possessed, is what it is then. So, but yeah, I would not be surprised at least if some of that stuff was actually legit now. Because again, it's like, what better than to, pass it off as entertainment and then make people be like, oh no, you're just talking about some show or some movie or whatever it is there. And it's like, the reality is that, that's exactly what they want you to think then. Is that it's just a show or a movie or something like that's what it is there. When in reality, it's actually going on for real then. So, anyway, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and call it a day then. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If I got any more information on what happened with any of this stuff, but I'm probably not going to talk about Rob Reiner much anymore after this then today. But for the other stuff, though, the terror attack there in Australia or the various stuff going on at Brown University and stuff like that, I'll probably do more on that this weekend. Or not this weekend, but this coming Friday for Freedom Friday, it'll be then. Most likely be like the mass update for that one, what it is there, and see how many other piece of shit Bloomberg paid cronies are trying to call for gun control now is what it is then. So, like I said, we already know that Angie Craig woman, who is a known Bloomberg funded piece of shit anti-gunner, is not trying to call for AWBs and magazine capacity bans and stuff like that. And yeah, we'll see how many others try to pull the same thing as what it is there, dude. So I'm guessing only the retarded ones will do it right now because, again, if you're going to do that kind of stuff, you don't want to do it before you get potentially into a primary situation in 2026. You want to do it after that, obviously. So, although some of these people are so, gerrymandered cheaters, what it is there, they just assume they can just do that stuff and they'll realize that the path is just being kicked out completely and have their entire congressional seat removed from the position of power, so it is there, which is exactly what we need to do right now anyway, across the board. There is no need to have 435 jackasses in Congress right now. We should easily be able to have 250 across the board, what it is there. Every state gets 5 seats. Every state has 1 seat that's in the capital. The other 4 in the ruralist areas, the particular state. And you would literally have a better country overall than is what it is. If nothing else, then we just redo the Electoral College when it comes to what the number of votes needed for presidency is what it is then. And then from there, you just simply have them, have it be like X amount of number. That's like a little bit less than what it is or whatever then. Instead of I want to say right now it's like 275 to win or something like that or whatever it is there. So, yeah, it'd be like 150 to win or something like that. Then is what it would be or something. So, but yeah, either way, it is what it is. It could easily be redone. It could easily be restructured into a better, more positive future government. But unfortunately, I don't think anybody would want to do that, especially when you're the old guard pieces of shit who've been holding power for decades of your life is what it is then. So, till we have a full change up completely, our biggest primaried out there is what it is. Nothing's ever going to change. But again, if they were primaried out, who's to say that their replacements are going to be so much worse than them as what it is then? So, it might just be a situation of just like total abolishment is what it is right now then. Just across the board and start fresh from the documents, specifically the Bill of Rights is what it is then. So, anyway, again, only time will tell on that one. So, other than that, hope you guys enjoyed this. Most likely Friday. Unless Honda does a chat for Tuesday night, which I might do for that, then if that'd be the case. So if he does a chat tomorrow night, I'll be on his panel, and if that'd be the case then. But other than that, next time I'll be on here, it must likely be Friday afternoon is what it is there. I do apologize for not doing another Slicey Boy episode this weekend. I've just been really shitty right now is what it is, dude. I've been super tired because of not being booted yet. And, yeah, I've just been trying to get some sleep. Here's what it is when I can. And thankfully, there was a nice day yesterday. I was able to get that done. But unfortunately, with the amount of just coldness in this place and the amount of just, literal like negative degree temperatures outside right now is what it is. It's really hard to want to do anything and not just be sleepy as hell all the time is what it is then. So, but yeah, anyway. Hope you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you all on the next one. Peace out, stay safe, always be caring, always be situationally aware, and always know potentially where your exits are so that you can get yourself and your family to safety when you need to, and so that you won't be the victim of something. And also, if you can't prevent a violent crime, do so, because you are going to be your own first responder in most of these cases. The police are never going to be there in time. It's always going to be you first. And if you have to do what needs to be done to take out a perpetrator, then do so. Be the guy that disarmed one of the two criminals there in Australia by taking their firearm. Be that person. Be ready to be that person, have that mindset ready, and get things done. Later, y'all. Peace out.